I don't usually wake up in the middle of the night, but something stirred me from sleep at exactly 3:07 a.m. Maybe it was the draft from the half-open window, or the creak of an old floorboard. At first I thought it was just the house settling, the way it sometimes groans under its own weight. But when I blinked into the darkness, my heart froze. There he was, Charlie, my son-in-law, standing over my bed. In his hands, he held a folder, my folder, the one where I kept copies of my house deed. The pale moonlight filtered through the curtains, and I could see the sharp outline of the papers. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, but no. His eyes met mine, wide and startled, like a thief caught mid-act. I forced myself not to move, even though my pulse hammered in my ears. Charlie? My voice cracked the silence. He froze like a deer in headlights, his knuckles whitening around the papers. Then, in an instant, that slick mask of his slipped back on. It was the slow unraveling of all the trust I'd built. Trust I'd invested in him because I couldn't bear to see my daughter's smile dim. Now, lying there the morning after, I realized the irony. I had spent my entire life protecting my family's future, building walls of security around my daughter, and yet, the one person I had allowed inside those walls, the man I welcomed as a son, was the one quietly mapping out how to tear them down. I pushed myself out of bed that morning with a heaviness in my chest. The sunlit kitchen felt colder than it should. Charlie greeted me with a casual, "Morning, Dad," as if nothing had happened. Lauren kissed me on the cheek, chatting about weekend plans, oblivious to the frost between us. I smiled back, of course. That's what years of business negotiations had taught me. Never show your hand too early. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. And while Lauren saw a picture-perfect family, I now saw cracks in the frame. The foundation was shaking, and this time, I wouldn't ignore it. 2 days after that 3 a.m. encounter, I was sitting at the kitchen table sipping my morning coffee when Lauren walked in. She had that nervous look about her, the kind where her hands fidget with her sleeves and her eyes avoid mine. I knew that look well. It was the same one she wore when she was 16, caught sneaking back into the house past curfew. Only this time, she wasn't a teenager with a guilty conscience. She was a grown woman with her husband's fingerprints all over her words. "Dad," she began, her voice carefully casual, "Charlie and I have been talking, and we think it might be a good idea for you to update your will. You know, just for tax purposes." I set my mug down slowly. The clink of ceramic against wood sounded louder than it should have. "For tax purposes?" I repeated. "Yes." She nodded quickly, too quickly. "Charlie has a friend. He's a financial advisor. He says if you don't restructure things now, there could be heavy estate taxes later. It's really just a precaution, nothing major." Her voice trembled just slightly, but her eyes kept darting toward the hallway where Charlie's shadow lingered, as though he was listening from just out of sight. The words settled in my chest like a stone. Update your will. Meet Charlie's friend. Move quickly. I took a long breath. "Sweetheart, I've managed my finances for decades. I've worked with Margaret, my attorney, for over 20 years. If something needed updating, she'd have told me." Lauren hesitated, biting her lip. "But Dad, times have changed. Things are more complicated now. Charlie just thinks..." And there it was. Charlie just thinks. Her nervousness wasn't hers. It was borrowed, rehearsed. She was parroting the lines he'd coached her on, probably the night before. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. My daughter. The same girl who used to crawl into my lap with skinned knees, who once promised she'd never let anyone come between us. And now, here she was, trying to sell me on, rewriting the map to my life's work, using words she barely understood. Because Charlie told her it was smart. I could have snapped then. I could have slammed my fist on the table, demanded to know what game he was playing. But instead, I smiled faintly, keeping my voice even. "Did Charlie tell you exactly what needs changing, or is this more of his friend's idea?" Her shoulders stiffened. "He just wants to make sure you're protected. You know how much he cares about our future." "Our future? Not your future, not my future. Our." The words sliced deeper than she realized. I wanted to tell her what I'd seen at 3 a.m., how I'd caught him standing over my bed like a vulture circling something not yet dead. I wanted to shake her, to make her see the trap she was walking into with eyes wide shut. But instead, I forced a calm nod. All right, why don't you and Charlie set up a meeting with this advisor of his? I'd like to hear his ideas. Her face lit with relief. Really? You'll consider it? Yes. I let the word hang in the air. I'll consider it. She leaned down, kissed my cheek, and hurried out of the kitchen, her steps quick and light like someone who'd just gotten away with something. I sat there in silence long after she left, staring at the steam curling from my coffee. My stomach turned. Estate planning wasn't new to me. I knew tax law changes, inheritance loopholes, the endless parade of advisors promising to protect families while quietly lining their own pockets. I'd seen wolves in suits before, but what chilled me wasn't the suggestion itself. It was the urgency. The way Charlie had fed lines to my daughter, pushing her to pressure me. The way she looked over her shoulder like a child afraid of disappointing a teacher. That wasn't love. That was control. And in that moment, I felt something sharper than fear, a cold, rising suspicion that this wasn't just about money. This was about timing, about power, about laying the groundwork for when I was no longer able to fight back. I picked up my mug again, though the coffee had gone cold. For the first time in years, it tasted bitter. Charlie thought he was clever, sending Lauren in as his messenger, thinking her soft voice and daughterly concern would weaken me. He thought I'd be too blinded by love to see the strings being pulled, but he underestimated me. I didn't survive decades of business negotiations, lawsuits, and betrayals by ignoring the signs. And I wasn't about to let my own son-in-law outmaneuver me in my own house. I'd play along, I'd smile, I'd nod, I'd even sit through his little advisor sales pitch if that's what it took. But deep inside, the decision was already made. Charlie had made his second mistake, and I had just begun my investigation. It had happened the way most discoveries do, by accident. A week after Lauren's tax purposes conversation, I walked into the kitchen earlier than usual. The smell of fresh coffee usually drew me in like a magnet. But that morning, it was something else. The low hum of an open laptop. Charlie's laptop. It sat on the counter, lid wide open, screen glowing in the dim morning light. I paused in the doorway, the hairs on the back of my neck prickling. Charlie wasn't in sight. Neither was Lauren. I knew I should respect privacy, but something in my gut told me to look. I moved closer, each step deliberate, as though crossing a minefield. And there it was. A page of search results stared back at me. How to liquidate elderly assets quickly. Another tab. Inheritance acceleration, legal loopholes. Another. Power of attorney aging parents sample forms. My chest tightened. My hand hovered over the mouse, hesitating. But curiosity, no, survival, pushed me forward. I clicked through the open windows. There were screenshots of property records, my property records, PDF copies of my deeds, tax assessments, and even bank statements. Folders named things like Collins Assets and Transfer Timeline. It felt like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't idle curiosity. This wasn't learning from Dad's wisdom. This was a man building a roadmap to strip me bare, and worse. It was happening under my own roof. I scrolled further, my jaw tightening. Notes appeared in a document titled Steps. 1. Gain POA, power of attorney. 2. Reassign deed under trust. 3. Secure banking access. The same smooth smile he always used at family dinners, the one that made me question whether my doubts about him were just paranoia. Oh, Dad? He stammered, using that word he always said too easily, as if overcompensating. I thought I heard a noise downstairs. I just came to check on you, make sure everything was all right. At 3 a.m, with my house deed in his hand, fear prickled my skin, but I kept my face calm, even as my mind screamed. And you needed my deed for that? He glanced at the papers, laughed nervously, and shoved them back onto the nightstand. Oh, must have grabbed it by mistake while looking for a flashlight. A flashlight. In my bedroom drawer. At 3 a.m, I wanted to leap out of bed, grab the papers, demand the truth, but I didn't. Years of being a father, of running a business, had taught me the power of silence. Sometimes silence unnerves people more than shouting ever could. 4. Timeline, 6 months. 6 months. That's how long he gave me before he expected me out of the picture. Legally, financially, maybe even literally. I shut the laptop slowly, my hands trembling. The kitchen felt colder, heavier, My pulse thudded in my ears as I leaned against the counter, trying to steady myself. I thought of Lauren, sweet Lauren, who believed she was building a future with a man who cared. Did she know about this? Was she in on it? Or was she just the pawn, too blinded by love to see she was being used as a weapon against me? A sound jolted me, the faint creak of footsteps upstairs. I snapped the laptop shut completely and slid it back exactly where it had been. I moved to the coffee maker just as Charlie came bounding down, barefoot, yawning like a man who hadn't a care in the world. "Morning, Dad," he said, stretching his arms. "Didn't hear you get up." I forced a smile, the taste of bile sharp in my throat. Couldn't sleep. He poured himself a cup of coffee, humming casually, his eyes never leaving me. For the first time, I noticed how calculated his cheerfulness was, how forced the rhythm of his small talk. "Lauren was saying we should call my buddy about that will thing," he said casually, stirring sugar into his cup. "You know, just to make sure everything's squared away." I nodded, though inside I was burning. "Sure, we'll talk about it soon." He smiled that practiced smile, the kind that didn't touch his eyes, and sipped his coffee. I excused myself a moment later, heading upstairs, my mind racing. I shut my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, my hands gripping my knees. For the first time, I felt not just suspicion, but confirmation. Charlie wasn't guessing. He wasn't joking. He wasn't just curious. He was planning, step by step, timeline and all. And he thought I'd never find out. I looked around my bedroom, the framed photos of Lauren as a child, her mother's keepsakes, the house I had built into a fortress of love and security. And yet, a predator had walked right through the front door, invited in by my daughter. That was when the cold realization settled over me like a second skin. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was war. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The images from Charlie's laptop haunted me. Tabs about asset liquidation. Timelines written like I was some project scheduled for demolition. It gnawed at me day and night. Every time I looked at Lauren, my chest ached. She deserved to know the man she had married. So I did what any father would do. I printed the screenshots, every page, every damning word. I slid them into a folder, the same kind I'd once used to organize her college applications. Except this folder wasn't filled with dreams. It was filled with evidence. I waited until she came by the house alone one afternoon. The timing felt deliberate, like fate handing me an opening. She walked into the kitchen carrying a bag of groceries, humming softly, her face glowing in that effortless way that made me forget she wasn't my little girl anymore. "Lauren," I said, my voice more serious than I intended. She froze, reading the weight in my tone. "What's wrong, Dad?" I opened the folder and slid it across the table toward her. "I need you to see this." She frowned, pulling the pages out. At first, her brow furrowed in confusion, her lips silently shaping the words as she skimmed the printouts. But then her expression hardened. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice sharp. "From Charlie's laptop," I said plainly. "He left it open. Lauren, he's planning something. He's been researching how to take control of everything I've built. He's documenting my assets like I'm already gone." Her face flushed red, not with shock, not with fear, but with anger. "You went through his computer? Lauren, did you hear what I just said?" I leaned forward, my voice trembling with urgency. "He's plotting against me, against us. He's looking for ways to get power of attorney, to liquidate everything I own. This isn't love, sweetheart. It's theft. It's betrayal." Her hands shook as she shoved the papers back into the folder. "Or maybe it's you, Dad. Maybe you're just paranoid." The word hit me harder than I expected. "Paranoid?" I repeated. She crossed her arms, her eyes flashing with hurt and defiance. "Charlie's been nothing but good to you. He's helped around the house. He's listened to your stories. He's tried to learn from you. And now you're accusing him of scheming like some villain in a TV drama?" "Lauren, I'm not accusing him," I said, my voice cracking with desperation. "I'm showing you proof. Look at those searches. Look at the way he's cataloged my life like inventory." Her chin trembled, but her voice only grew sharper. "You know, Charlie warned me this might happen. He said you were becoming forgetful, that maybe you weren't as sharp as you used to be. And now I'm starting to wonder if he was right." It felt like the floor gave way beneath me. "Lauren," my throat tightened around her name. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. I know what I saw. I've fought too hard for this family to let some slick smile and a few sweet words blind you to the truth." She shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "You hired investigators, you dig through his computer, and you expect me to just turn against my husband? You're sick, Dad. Maybe Charlie's right. Maybe you are losing your mind." Her words cut deeper than Charlie's betrayal ever could. I stared at her. This woman who was once my little girl, who used to trust me with her secrets and beg me to scare away the monsters under her bed. Now she was looking at me like I was the monster. The silence stretched long between us. Finally, she shoved the folder back across the table, her voice shaking. "I can't do this. I won't. If you keep pushing this, you'll lose me, Dad." And then she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the folder, my chest hollow. For years I had sacrificed everything, my comfort, my time, even my health, to make sure she never felt abandoned. And yet, here I was, abandoned by her, dismissed as paranoid and weak. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Each second felt like a nail in the coffin of the trust we once shared. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't speak. I barely breathed. But slowly the ache in my chest hardened into something else, something sharper. Resolve. If Lauren wouldn't believe me, then I'd have to protect her the only way I knew how, by facing Charlie myself, by playing the long game because I wasn't losing my daughter. And I wasn't about to lose everything I'd built. Not to him. Not now. Not ever. After my confrontation with Lauren, I felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped the marrow from my bones. Her words replayed over and over. "Maybe you are losing your mind." But I knew better. I knew what I'd seen. And when a man has spent a lifetime reading contracts, catching hidden clauses, spotting the flaw in a handshake deal, he doesn't ignore the signs. Still, I realized something important that night. If my daughter wouldn't believe me, then I had to find proof so undeniable, so damning, that even she couldn't look away. So I waited. That's what predators never expect, that the prey might turn, might watch them with sharper eyes than they realized. It was a Thursday night. I remember because the house was unusually quiet, no TV murmuring from the living room, no footsteps overhead. I lay in bed, the bedside clock glowing 12:43 a.m. I kept my breathing slow and steady, feigning sleep. Then I heard it. The faint squeak of the floorboard outside my room. A door creaking open. A pause, like someone listening to make sure the coast was clear. My pulse quickened, but I forced my eyelids to stay half closed, my body motionless. The door eased open, spilling a thin slice of light into my room. And there he was. Charlie, dressed in dark clothes, moving with a clumsy kind of stealth that only looked convincing in his own imagination. In his hand, a small flashlight cut thin beams through the shadows. He went straight to my dresser. Not a second's hesitation. He opened the top drawer, then the second, moving with the familiarity of someone who'd searched them before. My jaw clenched as I realized how many times he must have crept in here, how many nights I'd been oblivious to him rummaging through my life. Finally, he stopped at the bottom drawer. He bent low, the flashlight catching the brass key I'd left there years ago, an old key I hadn't used in decades, and his face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. So I just stared at him, my breath steady, my heart far from it. "Go back to bed, Charlie," I said finally, each word weighted. He nodded too quickly, retreating like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar. "Of course, Dad. Sorry to wake you." He slipped out the door, closing it gently behind him. I sat there in the dark, the papers still glowing faintly in the moonlight, my chest tight. My mind replayed the scene in loops, his pale face, the way he froze, the pathetic excuse. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't noise downstairs. He'd been standing over me, studying my life on paper, probably imagining it as his. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Until then, I'd convinced myself to give him the benefit of the doubt, for my daughter's sake. Lauren loved him. She swore he was attentive, ambitious, someone who only needed a chance to prove himself. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust the man she chose. But at 3 a.m., his lips curled into a grin, wide and hungry, as he picked it up between his fingers. He turned it over, studying it like it was the Holy Grail. My safe. That's what he thought it opened. He slipped the key into his pocket, his chest puffing slightly, like he had just won some secret battle. I wanted to leap out of bed, to catch him red-handed, to shout, "I see you, Charlie!" But I didn't. No. Instead, I let him leave, let him carry his false victory like a trophy. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly suspect, was that I had been watching the whole time, that his prize wasn't a key to my fortune, but a key to his downfall. The door clicked shut softly behind him, his footsteps fading down the hallway. I opened my eyes fully then, staring at the ceiling, my heart hammering against my ribs. The fear I'd carried for weeks shifted into something colder, sharper. Determination. He thought he was winning. He thought I was an old fool asleep in his bed, too weak to notice the knife hovering above. But I had just witnessed his true face, and now I had the final piece I needed. Not just suspicion, not just circumstantial evidence, but intent. Charlie wasn't guessing anymore. He wasn't planning in theory. He was moving in action, and that meant it was my move next. As I lay there in the silence of my darkened room, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt clarity. Let him keep the key. Let him believe the safe was his way in. Let him think he was clever. Because in truth, he'd just walked into my trap. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man under siege, and when you're under siege, you don't wait for the walls to crumble. You fortify. You gather allies. You prepare for the long fight. The first person I called was Margaret. Margaret Reynolds had been my attorney for over 20 years. She wasn't just sharp. She was steel wrapped in silk, the kind of woman who could smile sweetly while dismantling an opponent in court with nothing more than the truth. She'd seen me through acquisitions, disputes, even a few predatory lawsuits from competitors who thought they could bleed me dry. When she answered the phone, her voice was brisk but warm. "David, to what do I owe the pleasure so early?" I didn't waste time. "Margaret, I need to see you. Today. It's urgent." There was a pause, the kind that told me she heard more in my voice than I was saying. "Come by the office. I'll clear my schedule." An hour later, I was sitting in her wood-paneled office, the familiar scent of leather-bound books and strong coffee grounding me. She leaned back in her chair, hands folded, eyes sharp. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. From the 3 a.m., discovery to the laptop searches, to Lauren's reaction, to Charlie pocketing that key. I laid it all out, every detail, my voice growing hoarse with the weight of it. When I finished, Margaret was silent for a long time. Finally, she exhaled, her eyes narrowing. "David, you're describing a textbook case of inheritance fraud. I've seen this pattern before. Younger spouse or relative cozies up, gains trust, pushes for will changes, power of attorney, and once they have control..." She shook her head. "It doesn't end well for the elder." The word elder stung, but I let it pass. "What do I do?" I asked. She leaned forward. "You act fast. If he's already rehearsing your daughter, if he's already documenting your assets, he's moving quicker than most. The first step is protecting what you have. We restructure your estate into a trust, ironclad, unbreakable. We revise your will with strict provisions that keep him from touching a cent. And David..." She locked eyes with me, her voice low, firm. "You cannot let him anywhere near power of attorney. That's the golden ticket. Once he has that, it's over." Her words settled heavy in the room. I nodded slowly. "Then we move. Today." The second person I brought in was Robert, my longtime financial advisor. If Margaret was steel, Robert was granite, steady, immovable, practical to the core. I met him at his office later that afternoon, the glow of computer screens reflecting off his glasses as he listened. When I told him what Charlie had been researching, he didn't look surprised, just disappointed. "David," he said quietly, "I wish I could say this is uncommon, but I've seen too many families torn apart because someone thought they were entitled to what another man built. You did the work, you took the risks, you carried the weight. He sees the reward, but not the sacrifice." He pulled up spreadsheets showing me asset allocations, explaining how we could lock accounts behind multiple layers of authorization. He even suggested moving certain holdings temporarily, far enough out of reach that even if Charlie somehow gained access, he'd find nothing but smoke and shadows. Listening to Robert, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. The danger was real, and now I had allies who could see it too. As I drove home that evening, the city lights flickering past, my mind felt sharper than it had in months. Margaret's warning echoed in my ears. Robert's steady voice reminded me I wasn't alone. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had shifted from defense to offense. Charlie thought he was the only one with a plan. He thought my age, my love for Lauren, my silence meant weakness. But he was wrong. I wasn't weak. I was patient. And now, with Margaret and Robert by my side, I wasn't just a father trying to protect his daughter. I was a strategist preparing for battle. And this war was just beginning. The day after meeting with Margaret and Robert, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. For weeks I'd been reacting, shaken awake at 3 a.m., blindsided by conversations, left doubting my own instincts. But now, for the first time, I was the one setting the terms. Margaret's words rang in my ears. Document everything. Evidence is your shield and your sword. So I did. The first step was simple. Cameras. Discreet, motion-activated, small enough to hide in plain sight. I had them installed in the study, the living room, even the hallway leading to my bedroom. I told Lauren I was modernizing the security system. She smiled and kissed my cheek, saying it was a great idea. Charlie gave me that same tight smile he always wore, but I caught the flicker in his eyes, the quick calculation of a man who wondered what I was hiding. Good. Let him wonder. The second step was records. I started a journal. Every interaction, every suspicious glance, every word that could be twisted later, dates, times, details. My handwriting filled the pages like a lifeline, each entry a reminder that I wasn't losing my mind. I wasn't imagining things. I was building a case. It didn't take long before the evidence began piling up. 3 nights later, I sat in my study, reviewing footage from the hidden camera. There he was, Charlie, creeping in after midnight, his phone flashlight bobbing in the dark. He pulled open drawers, rifled through papers, snapping photos with his phone. He didn't even bother to put things back the way he found them, as if convinced I was too blind or too old to notice. I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tight. The arrogance, the audacity. The next night, more footage. Charlie in the basement, measuring the dimensions of my safe with a tape measure. He squatted down, pressing his ear to the metal, running his fingers along the lock like a burglar in a bad movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life, my family, my legacy. And then came the phone call. I caught it purely by chance. He'd stepped outside onto the porch, thinking the night air would cover his tracks. But the camera by the back door caught everything. Yeah, he whispered into the phone, his voice low, urgent. I've got most of it. Property deeds, bank info, the safe dimensions. Just a few more weeks and we'll be ready. Timeline's tight, but doable. I replayed that clip over and over, my stomach twisting. He wasn't just scheming. He was working with someone else, a partner, maybe the so-called advisor friend, maybe someone worse. I could have stormed into his room that very night, shoved the recordings in his face, and demanded answers. But I didn't, because rage without proof is weakness. And I wasn't weak anymore. The next morning, I quietly uploaded copies of the recordings and documents to a secure drive, something Margaret could access if anything happened to me. For the first time, I felt a strange kind of safety. Not physical safety. I knew Charlie was capable of anything if cornered. But the safety of knowing I wasn't alone in this anymore. Every move he made, every step he took deeper into his own trap, I was there watching. Recording. Documenting. By the end of that week, the picture was undeniable. Charlie wasn't just a greedy fool stumbling into temptation. He was deliberate, methodical. He had a plan and a timeline, and he thought no one saw it but him. But I saw. And with every file saved, every video clip archived, every journal entry logged, I felt my fear fading and something else taking its place. Control. With the weight of my own house deed clutched in his greedy hands, I realized this wasn't just nervous curiosity. No. This was something darker. A storm was brewing right inside my own home. I leaned back against the pillow, forcing myself to breathe evenly. The years had toughened me. I'd built companies from the ground up, lost money, earned it back, faced betrayals in boardrooms and lawsuits in cold courtrooms. but nothing felt like this. This was family. This was supposed to be sacred ground. The papers rustled as I slid them back into the drawer myself. My hand lingered on the handle, my mind already racing ahead. Why was he looking at my deed? Why now? And how long had he been planning whatever he was planning? I didn't know the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to sit quietly and let someone, especially my own son-in-law, rob me blind while smiling across my dinner table. For the first time in months, I felt like the man I used to be. The man who had built an empire from nothing, who had stared down rivals twice his size and walked away the victor. Charlie wasn't a rival worthy of fear. He was a boy who thought he could play in a man's world, and he was about to learn what happens when you underestimate the wrong man. By now, I had hours of footage, stacks of notes, and a folder that could bury Charlie in court, but one question kept me up at night. Why was he so good at this? The way he moved through my drawers, the precision of his searches, the confidence with which he laid out his timeline. This wasn't clumsy greed, this was practiced. So, I called Robert. He agreed to meet me at his office late in the evening, when the building was nearly empty and the city hummed with neon and tired footsteps. I sat across from him at his desk, sliding over a flash drive with recordings. He watched a few minutes of footage, his jaw tightening. Then he pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose and leaned back. "David," he said, his tone grim, "this isn't his first time." "What do you mean?" Robert tapped the screen. "The way he inventories, the way he talks about liquidation, the 6-month timeline, it's too polished. I've seen this before. Patterns like this don't come out of nowhere. This man has done it before, maybe more than once." The words hit me like ice water. I gripped the edge of the desk. "Are you saying Charlie's a predator?" Robert nodded slowly. "A financial predator. They exist. Men who target vulnerable partners or family members, slowly isolating them, gaining legal control, and bleeding them dry. I'll dig into his past. Let's see what turns up." For 2 days I lived in a fog of dread, waiting for Robert's call. When it finally came, his voice was low, urgent. "David, we need to talk, in person." I drove straight to his office, my hands slick on the steering wheel. Robert didn't waste time. He had a file ready, thick with clippings, records, and court filings. He spread them out across the table like a prosecutor preparing an opening argument. 3 years ago, he began, Charlie was engaged to a woman in Florida. Her father, an older man, wealthy, widowed, died suddenly of a heart attack. Within 2 weeks, his entire estate was transferred into a trust controlled by Charlie. The daughter swore it was her father's wishes, but family members contested it. The case was messy, but here's the kicker. Charlie walked away with nearly $500,000. Then, not long after, the engagement ended. Quietly. I stared at the documents, my stomach twisting. "And no charges?" Robert shook his head. "There was suspicion, but not enough hard evidence." He covered his tracks. By the time investigators dug in, everything was wrapped up legally. My hands trembled as I picked up a photograph. Charlie at some engagement party, grinning in the same slick way he grinned across my dinner table. Beside him, a woman in a white dress smiled brightly, unaware she was standing next to a man who would one day strip her family of everything. Robert's voice cut through my haze. "He's a pattern predator, David. He finds families with assets, gains their trust, uses their daughters as shields, and positions himself to inherit or control. You're not just his father-in-law. You're his current target." The words sank deep, heavier than stone. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. All those dinners, all those questions about my business, the way he slipped dad into every sentence. It wasn't affection. It was strategy. "Why didn't Lauren see it?" I whispered, more to myself than to Robert. Robert's expression softened. "Because that's how predators work. They charm the one closest to the target. They wrap themselves in loyalty and love until doubt feels like betrayal. It's not her fault, David. It's his game, and he's very, very good at it." I closed the file slowly, my jaw tight, my pulse thundering. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about survival, about stopping a man who had already destroyed one family before he destroyed mine. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down. Then I spoke, my voice low but steady. "Robert, we're not just going to protect what's mine. We're going to expose him. We're going to end this." Robert nodded firmly. Then we start by tightening every lock he thinks he can open. And when he makes his move, we'll be ready. As I left the office that night, the city air felt colder, sharper. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but it wasn't the chill that made me shiver. It was the realization that the man sleeping under the same roof as my daughter wasn't just greedy. He was dangerous. And I was the only one who could stop him. I thought the file Robert gave me would be the turning point. The clippings, the court records, the engagement photos, hard evidence of Charlie's past. I thought, once Lauren sees this, she'll understand. She'll finally see him for who he is. I was wrong. I invited her over on a quiet Sunday afternoon, just the two of us. I wanted it to feel safe, familiar. I even baked the banana bread she loved as a girl, hoping the smell of home would soften what I had to say. When she walked in, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Dad, this is sweet. Just us today?" "Yes," I said gently, guiding her to the table. The file sat there between us, thick with truth. "I need you to see something." Her smile faltered when I slid it toward her. She opened the folder, flipping through photos of Charlie with his former fiancée. Newspaper headlines about a wealthy man's sudden death. Court filings about contested estates. At first, her brow furrowed. Then her eyes narrowed. "What is this?" she demanded. "Evidence," I said quietly. "Charlie has done this before, Lauren. He targeted another family, another father. He walked away with their fortune, left destruction behind. And now," I swallowed hard, forcing the words out, "now he's doing the same to us." Her face flushed. She shoved the papers back across the table as if they burned her fingers. "You went digging into his past?" Her voice rose, sharp and incredulous. "You hired people to spy on him, to humiliate him? Lauren, listen to me. No." Her voice cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of understanding. They were tears of anger, of betrayal. At me. "Charlie warned me this might happen," she said, her voice trembling. "He said you'd twist things, make him look like a villain. He told me you were obsessed, that you'd try to tear us apart because you can't stand to share me with anyone else." The words struck like knives. "Lauren," my throat tightened around her name. "This isn't about sharing you. This is about protecting you, protecting everything I've built for you. Look at the documents. Look at the pattern. He's not who you think he is." She slammed her palm on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "You're sick, Dad. Do you hear yourself? You're paranoid. You've always controlled everything. My school, my friends, my choices. And now you're trying to control my marriage." My chest ached, every word slicing deeper than the last. I leaned forward, desperate. "Sweetheart, please. I've never controlled you. I've only wanted to protect you. I buried your mother with the promise that I'd never let you be hurt like this. And I will not stand by while a predator steals you from me." But she wasn't hearing me. She wasn't my little girl anymore, not the one who used to slip her hand into mine for safety. She was a woman standing across from me, her loyalty chained to the very man tearing us apart. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Maybe Charlie's right. Maybe you are losing your mind." The room spun. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Of all the betrayals I'd prepared myself for, Charlie's greed, his deception, I had never prepared myself for this. My own daughter choosing him over me. I sat back slowly, my hands trembling. The folder lay between us, unopened now, the truth screaming from its pages but falling on deaf ears. Lauren stood, tears streaking her cheeks. "If you keep pushing this, you're going to lose me. Do you understand? You'll lose me." She grabbed her coat and stormed out, the slam of the door rattling the walls of the home I had built to protect her. For a long time, I sat there alone, the smell of banana bread thick in the air, the file still spread across the table like a wound. Her words echoed in my head, "You'll lose me." And maybe I already had, but as the silence settled in around me, something hardened deep in my chest. I couldn't save her right now, not from her love, not from his lies, but I could save everything else. I could protect my legacy. I could protect the truth. And when the day came that Charlie's mask finally slipped, I'd be ready. Because no matter how blind my daughter was now, one day she would see. And when she did, I would have the proof waiting. After Lauren stormed out, I sat alone at the kitchen table long into the night. The file of evidence lay open, untouched, like a corpse no one wanted to claim. Her words echoed over and over. Maybe you are losing your mind. You'll lose me. I had lost her trust, maybe for now. But that didn't mean I had to lose everything else. When you've spent decades in business, you learn an important truth. When the storm is coming, you don't argue with the clouds. You board up the windows, lock the doors, and prepare for impact. That night, lying awake in the suffocating silence, I felt the first sparks of something I hadn't felt in years. Not just fear, not just suspicion, determination. Charlie thought he was clever, that he could sneak around my home under cover of darkness. But he'd made his first mistake. He woke me up, and now I was wide awake, not just to the sound in the night, but to who he really was, and I would never sleep as soundly again. When I finally drifted into a restless sleep after that night, my dreams were haunted by memories, faces from the past, echoes of choices that had brought me here. And when the sun broke through my curtains, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking not about Charlie's pale face at 3 a.m., but about the long road that had led me to this point. You see, I wasn't born into wealth. Everything I had, I built brick by brick, deal by deal, sacrifice by sacrifice. That's exactly what I decided to do. The next morning, I called Margaret. "It's time," I told her. My voice was calm, steadier than I felt. "I want everything locked down, trusts, wills, deeds, everything." She didn't hesitate. "Come to my office. Bring your IDs and documents. We'll start today." By noon, I was sitting across from her, signing papers that would reshape the battlefield. We created a family trust, airtight, legally unbreakable. The assets I had spent a lifetime building, properties, accounts, investments, were transferred into it. Lauren would still inherit one day, but not freely. Only under conditions that ensured no manipulative spouse could ever bleed her dry. Next came the will. Margaret drafted clauses so specific, so ironclad, that not even the slickest lawyer could twist them. If Lauren remarried someone with a history of fraud, if she transferred assets to anyone else without approval, her access would freeze. My wealth wouldn't vanish into the hands of predators. Finally, we addressed power of attorney. Margaret's words echoed in my mind. That's the golden ticket. We stripped any possibility of Charlie's influence by naming Margaret herself as my attorney. In fact, a woman I trusted with my legacy more than my own blood. It hurt to write Lauren's name off those papers, but I knew I had no choice. As we finished, Margaret leaned across the desk, her eyes hard but kind. "David, you're doing the right thing. This isn't about punishing your daughter. This is about protecting her future, even if she can't see it yet." Her words steadied me. From there, Robert took over. Together we moved accounts into layers of protection, dual authorizations, delayed access, encrypted passwords. He even shifted some holdings temporarily offshore, beyond the reach of any domestic claim. If Charlie thought he could charm or bully his way into my accounts, he'd find nothing but locked gates and walls too high to climb. It was exhausting work, but with every signature, every notarized page, every transferred account, I felt the weight lifting from my chest. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But make no mistake, I wasn't done. Because protecting myself wasn't enough. I needed Charlie to show his hand. I needed him to commit, to make a mistake so big there'd be no denying who he really was. That's when the idea came to me. I would turn his obsession into a weapon. The key he stole, the safe he thought was his prize, I would let him keep believing it. But instead of treasure, he'd find his own noose waiting inside. So I set the stage. I reorganized my study, leaving just enough breadcrumbs for him to find. Old documents, receipts, a carefully placed insurance letter that hinted at hidden accounts. All meaningless, but suggestive enough to fuel his greed. And the safe? I planted it with what I wanted him to discover. Photographs of his midnight prowls, copies of his searches, and a single note in bold black ink. "I know who you are." As I shut the heavy steel door and spun the dial, I felt something deep inside me harden. I wasn't just protecting my wealth anymore. I was preparing justice. Charlie thought he was hunting me, but from that moment forward, he was the one walking straight into the trap. Once the fortress was built, trusts sealed, will rewritten, accounts locked down, I shifted my focus from defense to offense. Protecting my assets wasn't enough anymore. I wanted Charlie to expose himself, to step right into the snare I had built for him, and for that, I had to let him believe he was winning. I began with whispers, small, deliberate hints, the kind of slip-ups a weary old man might make. At breakfast one morning, I rubbed my temples and sighed. Doctor wants me in for some memory tests next week. Says I've been forgetful. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Charlie freeze mid-bite. His fork hovered over his plate for just a fraction of a second, then lowered slowly. Memory tests, huh? He said lightly, too lightly. Well, probably just routine, nothing to worry about. But his eyes gave him away. Behind that mask of concern, they gleamed with something darker. Opportunity. I gave him more to chew on. A misplaced bill left conveniently on my desk, marked overdue. A checkbook, accidentally, left open to a balance lower than usual. A phone call to Robert about selling property before my health goes downhill. Loud enough for Charlie to overhear as he passed by the study. Each breadcrumb was planted with care, and each one made his mask slip just a little further. Lauren noticed, of course. "Dad, are you all right? You've been forgetful lately." I smiled, touching her hand. "Oh, nothing serious, sweetheart. Just getting older, I suppose." Charlie stood behind her, silent, but I could feel his eyes drilling into me, weighing every word. He thought he was watching me unravel. He thought the prize was within his reach. And then I gave him the pièce de résistance, the key. I knew he still carried it in his pocket like a talisman, the old brass key he thought would open the safe. One evening, as I sat in the living room, I pretended to search my pockets, patting them clumsily. "Must have misplaced that darn safe key again," I muttered aloud, just loud enough for him to hear. When our eyes met, I gave him a weary smile, the kind of smile a man gives when he doesn't realize his secret is already slipping away. He looked down quickly, but not before I caught the flicker of triumph in his face. "Got you?" I thought. From there, I doubled down on the performance. I let him see me nod off in the recliner, papers spread across my lap. I let him overhear confused conversations with Margaret on the phone, conversations she and I had rehearsed, designed to sound as though my memory was failing, that I was losing grip on my estate. And each time, Charlie's confidence swelled. He strutted more around the house, his shoulders looser, his smile wider. He spoke to Lauren with more authority, dropping phrases like, "Once things are in order," and "when your dad's affairs are settled." Lauren still defended him, still saw a husband planning their future, instead of a wolf circling his prey. But I wasn't watching her anymore. I was watching him, and he was falling for it. One night, as I walked down the hallway, I overheard him on the phone again. His voice was sharp, impatient. "It won't be long. He's slipping faster than I expected. I've got the key, I've got the timeline. Just a matter of weeks now." I pressed myself against the wall, my fists clenched, my heart pounding. Not from fear this time, but from satisfaction. Because the more he believed I was weak, the stronger my trap became. The safe was ready. The documents inside were planted. The cameras were rolling. Every move he made now was being captured, cataloged, preserved. All I had to do was wait. And waiting, as Charlie was about to learn, was something I had mastered long before he was even born. It was a little past 2 a.m. when I heard the faint scrape of metal against metal. I was awake, sitting in the darkened study, my chair turned toward the window. The house was silent except for that one sound, the sound of a man certain he was about to claim everything he'd been scheming for. Charlie. I didn't need the cameras this time. I didn't need the hidden microphones or the carefully planted files. No, I wanted to hear it with my own ears. I wanted to feel the weight of the moment when he crossed the line from suspicion to crime. I sat still, my breath steady, my pulse measured, as I listened to him pad softly down the hallway. Then came the creak of the basement door, the careful shuffle of his steps descending into the dark. The safe was down there. I had left just enough bait to guide him, hints of hidden accounts, whispers of a failing memory, the false reassurance of that brass key he carried like a charm. And now, finally, he was taking the bait. I rose silently from my chair and followed, each step practiced, controlled. The basement was cool, the air heavy with dust and concrete. At the far end, Charlie knelt before the safe, his flashlight beam dancing across the steel surface. He was hunched, his hands trembling, not with fear, but with anticipation. I watched as he slid the brass key into the lock. Click. The door swung open with a groan. For a moment, he froze, as though savoring his victory. Then he leaned forward eagerly, pulling out the manila envelope I had placed inside. His grin widened as he tore it open, expecting deeds, cash, proof of fortunes ripe for the taking. Instead, his smile faltered. His hands pulled out photographs, grainy stills of himself creeping through my house at night, screenshots of his searches about inheritance fraud, printouts of his whispered phone calls, and finally a single sheet of paper with words scrawled in bold black ink. "I know exactly who you are." The color drained from his face. His breathing grew ragged. He flipped through the papers desperately, as though the wealth he imagined might still be hiding at the bottom of the envelope. But all he found was evidence. His evidence. That's when I stepped out of the shadows. "Looking for something, Charlie?" He spun around, the flashlight jerking wildly, its beam cutting across my face. His eyes widened in terror as he realized I'd been there all along. "Dad," he stammered, his voice cracking. My father had been a machinist, a man who came home with grease under his fingernails and pride in his work, but never much money in his pocket. He used to tell me, "David, don't ever wait for life to hand you anything. You work, you plan, and you protect what's yours." I carried that lesson into every decision I made. In my 20s, while most of my friends were busy burning through paychecks at bars, I was buying rundown duplexes, fixing them with my own two hands, and renting them out. Real estate became my second language, and by the time I hit 40, I had a modest empire, homes, small businesses, investments that I managed with care. And through it all, there was Lauren, my daughter, my pride. When her mother passed away, she was only 16, too young to lose her mother, too young to watch me drown in grief while trying to keep our lives steady. But she was strong, smarter, and more resilient than most. This isn't, save it, I said, my voice low, steady, sharper than I'd ever spoken to him. "I've watched you. Every step, every lie, every midnight crawl through my house. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was blind?" He shook his head, his hands trembling as he clutched the envelope. "You don't understand. I was just researching, planning, stealing." I took a step closer, my shadow stretching long across the basement floor. "I built this life with my hands, my sweat, my sacrifice. And you thought you could take it with a flashlight and a key?" Charlie dropped the envelope, the papers scattering across the concrete like fallen leaves. He lifted his hands in a pathetic gesture of surrender. "Please, I didn't mean, Lauren, she made me." "Don't you dare blame her," I snapped, my voice rising. "She may have defended you, but she didn't sneak into my room at night. She didn't steal my documents. She didn't plan to gut my estate like a thief in the dark. That was you." His lips trembled, his eyes darting toward the stairs as though calculating escape. But I was between him and the door, and this time I wasn't moving aside. I pulled out my phone, the red light of the camera blinking steadily. "It's all here, Charlie. Every word, every move. And now, your confession." He paled, sweat breaking across his forehead. "Please, Dad. We can work this out. I was just trying to secure Lauren's future. Our future. You know how much I love her." I let the silence stretch, his begging words bouncing off the cold basement walls. Then I said the truth, slow and deliberate. "You don't love her. You never did. You love what she gives you access to." And now that mask is gone. Charlie's knees seemed to buckle under the weight of those words. He collapsed to the floor, his head in his hands, the envelope of his own crimes scattered around him. For a long moment, I simply stood there, watching him, not with pity, not with rage, with the calm satisfaction of a man who had outwaited the storm, because the night of reckoning had come, and the predator was finally exposed. Charlie knelt on the basement floor, the manila envelope and his crimes scattered around him like broken glass. My phone camera caught every twitch of his hands, every bead of sweat dripping down his forehead. But I wasn't finished, not yet. Because this wasn't just about me. It was about Lauren. I heard footsteps upstairs, the soft pad of slippers on hardwood, the creak of the stairwell, a sleepy voice, worried. "Charlie, Dad, what's going on down there?" My heart tightened as Lauren appeared at the top of the steps, her robe drawn tight around her, her hair tousled from sleep. She looked between us, confusion clouding her face. "Lauren," I said, my voice steady but heavy. "Come down. You need to see this." She descended slowly, her eyes darting from me to Charlie, who scrambled to his feet, his face pale and frantic. Lauren, baby, it's not what it looks like," he stammered, but the papers betrayed him. Photographs of his midnight prowls, screenshots of his inheritance searches, notes about liquidation timelines, all lying bare on the cold basement floor. Lauren froze halfway down the stairs, her hand gripping the railing. "Charlie, what is this?" He rushed toward her, hands outstretched, desperation dripping from every word. "Sweetheart, listen. Your dad set me up. He's been after me from the start, digging, planting things. He wants to break us apart." I stepped between them, my phone still recording. "Enough lies? Lauren, look, these are his, from his computer, from his own hands." I held up the photos, the printouts, the damning words. Elderly asset liquidation, power of attorney, timeline, 6 months. Her eyes scanned the pages, her breath quickening. She shook her head slowly, her voice cracking. No, Charlie, tell me this isn't true." Charlie grabbed her hands, his voice breaking. "It's not what you think. I was just planning for us, for our future. Your dad's getting older. He needs help. I was trying to make sure we were secure." Her face crumpled, torn between love and dawning horror. "By stealing from him? By sneaking into his room at night? By lying to me?" He tried to hold her gaze, but his voice faltered. I was going to tell you. I didn't know how." "Didn't know how?" My voice cut through the air like a blade. "You knew exactly how. You've done it before, haven't you?" Charlie spun toward me, rage flashing. "Shut up!" But the words hung there, undeniable, because Lauren's eyes widened. She turned to me, her lips trembling. "Before? What does he mean?" I held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Ask him about Florida. Ask him about the fiancée he abandoned after her father's sudden death. Ask him how $500,000 disappeared into his pockets." Charlie's face went ghostly white. That's a lie." But Lauren's knees buckled. She sank onto the bottom stair, her hands clutching her face. Her sobs filled the basement, raw and broken. "Lauren," Charlie whispered, kneeling before her, reaching for her hands. "Baby, please, you've got to believe me." She jerked her hands away as though his touch burned. Her voice was sharp, ragged, but filled with fury. "Don't you dare call me that. Don't you dare." Her eyes met mine, brimming with tears, her voice shaking. "Dad. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I didn't believe you. I defended him. I knelt beside her, putting a hand on her shoulder. My voice was quiet, but resolute. "You wanted to believe the man you loved. There's no shame in that. But now you see him for who he really is." Charlie's mask was gone. The charming son-in-law, the attentive husband, the smiling predator, gone. What stood before us was nothing but a desperate thief, cornered, his lies unraveling faster than he could spin them. "Please," he begged, dropping to his knees in front of Lauren. "We can fix this. We can move past it. I'll change, I promise." But she shook her head, her tears falling freely. "No, Charlie, we can't move past betrayal. We can't move past what you are." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and in that silence, I knew the war was over. He was finished. The basement smelled of dust and cold concrete, but what lingered in the air was heavier than that. Betrayal, finally stripped bare. Charlie knelt on the floor, his hands trembling, his voice reduced to pitiful whimpers. Lauren sat on the stairs, her face buried in her hands, sobbing. I stood over them both, my phone still recording. Every second of his excuses, his begging, his collapse, it was all there, irrefutable, and I knew exactly what to do next. By sunrise, I was at the police station. Margaret met me there, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum floor, her expression as fierce as a general heading into battle. She took the phone, scrolled through the recordings, and nodded. "This is more than enough. He won't talk his way out of this." The officer who took our statement was a young man, maybe 30, his face tightening as he watched the footage. Breaking and entering, attempted fraud, coercion. "This isn't just family drama, sir. This is a criminal case." By noon, they came for him. 2 squad cars pulled up in front of the house, lights flashing silently in the morning sun. The neighbors peeked from behind curtains as officers marched up the walk. Charlie, still in his robe, stepped onto the porch looking confused until he saw the handcuffs. "Wait, what is this? You can't—" "Lauren, tell them. This is a mistake." Lauren stood behind the storm door, her face pale, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She didn't say a word. The officers read him his rights as they cuffed him, his protests growing louder, more frantic. "I didn't do anything. He's framing me. This is all lies." But the cameras had captured the truth. The safe had captured the truth. His own words, his own actions, had trapped him. The news spread quickly. Small towns have long memories, but they also have fast tongues. Within days, headlines hit the local papers. Son-in-law arrested in inheritance fraud scheme. Pattern predator caught targeting wealthy families. Reporters called it a textbook case, praising the legal foresight that had saved my estate from vanishing into his hands. The neighbors who once waved politely from their lawns now whispered openly about how they'd always had a bad feeling about him. And Lauren? She collapsed into my arms one evening, her sobs racking her body. "I defended him, Dad. I told you that you were paranoid. I chose him over you." I held her tightly, stroking her hair like I used to when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. "You wanted to believe in love. That's not a sin. What matters is, you see the truth now." But the truth was brutal. Charlie faced a mountain of charges. Margaret coordinated with prosecutors, ensuring every shred of evidence was airtight. The recordings, the searches, the documents, the background from Florida, it all came together to paint the picture of a predator who had finally been cornered. I made a promise at her mother's graveside that day that I would give Lauren every chance, every safety net, every ounce of love I had left, and I kept that promise. Private school, college fully paid, a down payment on her first car, every recital, every graduation, I was there. Not just because I had the means, but because I refused to let her feel abandoned by life. So, when she brought Charlie home 2 years ago, I wanted, desperately wanted, to believe he was the one. I remember that dinner clearly. Lauren's smile was wide, her eyes glowing in that way they hadn't since she was a little girl, showing me a perfect report card. Charlie sat across from me, hair slicked back, a confidence that bordered on arrogance. But he laughed at my old jokes, complimented the house, and, this was the part that disarmed me, he asked questions about my businesses. Not in a greedy way, at least not at first. More like admiration, like he wanted to learn. When he stood in court weeks later, shackled and pale, the confidence he once wore like armor was gone. His voice cracked as he pleaded not guilty, but the evidence roared louder than any denial. Lauren sat beside me, her hand gripping mine so tightly it left marks. She flinched as the prosecutor laid out his schemes, as the judge recited the charges, as witnesses described his midnight searches. By the time the gavel fell, there was no doubt. Charlie wasn't just a liar, he was a criminal, and he was going away for a long time. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile. Justice, when it comes, is rarely sweet. It's heavy, like a storm finally breaking after weeks of dark skies. Relief mixes with grief, vindication with sorrow. But as we walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon light, I glanced at Lauren beside me. Her face was pale, her eyes red. But for the first time in months, there was clarity in her gaze. The mask had slipped. The truth had won. And though our family bore the scars of betrayal, we were finally free of the predator who thought he could devour us. The day Charlie was sentenced, the courthouse emptied slowly. Families drifted out in clusters, reporters lingered with cameras, and the weight of justice hung thick in the air. Lauren and I sat in the car for a long time, neither of us speaking. She stared out the window, her reflection pale and haunted in the glass. I watched her in silence, my chest heavy with both anger and love. Finally, she whispered, "I don't know how I let it get this far, how I defended him, how I couldn't see it." I placed my hand over hers, steady, firm. "Because you wanted to believe in him. Because you wanted your marriage to be built on love, not lies. That doesn't make you weak, Lauren. It makes you human." Her eyes brimmed with tears as she turned to me. "But I hurt you, Dad. I said terrible things. I accused you of losing your mind. I chose him over you." Her voice broke, and she covered her face with her hands. For a moment, she was my little girl again, hiding from a thunderstorm, waiting for me to tell her everything would be all right. But I couldn't just say the words, not this time. "Lauren," I said quietly, my voice heavy with both love and resolve, "I will always forgive you. You're my daughter. That will never change. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. Trust is different. Trust has to be rebuilt." She lowered her hands slowly, her lips trembling. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, taking a deep breath, "that I will never cut you out of my life. You will inherit what I've built, but not freely, not carelessly. It will come through a managed trust. You'll have counseling, financial oversight, and you won't see full access until you're 40. Her brows knit together, a flash of frustration sparking in her eyes. But then the spark dimmed, replaced by something softer. Acceptance. "You don't trust me," she whispered. "I don't trust the choices you've made," I corrected gently. "But I want to, and I'm giving you the chance to prove yourself. Not with words, Lauren, with actions. Over time." Her tears spilled freely now, rolling down her cheeks. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." I squeezed her hand. "Maybe not, but you have it anyway, because love doesn't mean being naive. It means protecting each other, even when it hurts." The silence that followed was raw, fragile. For years I had been her shield, the father who fixed broken toys, who stayed up late checking homework, who held her after her mother died. And now, I realized, my role hadn't changed. I was still her shield, but the battles had grown heavier and the wounds cut deeper. She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder, her sobs soft and tired. "I'll earn it back, Dad. I promise. I'll prove to you I can be the daughter you deserve." I wrapped my arm around her, staring out at the city lights beyond the windshield. "That's all I ask." And for the first time in months, I felt something shift inside me. Not complete peace, not yet, but a step toward healing. Because forgiveness was the bridge, and trust would be the road we had to rebuild together, one careful step at a time. 6 months can change a life. 6 months ago, I was watching my daughter defend a predator. 6 months ago, I was bracing myself against the sting of her words. Maybe you are losing your mind. Now the air feels different, lighter, not healed entirely, but on the path. Lauren divorced Charlie 3 months after the trial. She filed quietly, without drama, without excuses. Just a clean cut, a final severing of the tie that had nearly destroyed her. I remember the day the papers came through. She stood in my doorway, her eyes red but clear. "It's done," she said softly. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was clutching someone slipping away. I felt like I was holding my daughter again. But rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight. Margaret had put the inheritance conditions into place, and Lauren didn't fight them. Instead, she embraced them. She started seeing a financial counselor every week, learning how to budget, how to invest wisely, how to plan for the future. She even took on extra work at her firm, long hours, sometimes thankless projects. But she did it without complaint. "Actions, not words," she told me one evening as we sat on the porch sipping tea. "You said that's how I'd earn back your trust, so that's what I'm doing." Her words sank deep, not just into my ears, but into my heart. There were moments of tension, of course, nights when she'd call in tears, struggling with loneliness, days when anger flared at the injustice of what she'd endured. But instead of running back into old patterns, she faced the pain head on. Therapy became part of her routine, and slowly she began to unravel the web Charlie had spun around her. And me, I found peace in routine again. Morning walks through the neighborhood, afternoons tending the garden, evenings filled with books I'd long neglected. But more than that, I found peace in knowing I had done what needed to be done, not just for myself, but for Lauren. Because protecting your family doesn't end when your children grow up. It changes shape, but it never disappears. One evening, 6 months after Charlie's arrest, Lauren and I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once slid her that folder of damning evidence, the same table where she had thrown my trust back in my face. But this time, the air was different, softer, healing. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly as it touched mine. "Dad," she whispered, "thank you. Not just for protecting me, but for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. I looked into her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the little girl who used to run through this house barefoot, laughing, her mother's smile lighting up her face. "You've earned this, Lauren," I said quietly. "Not the inheritance, not the trust. You've earned my faith back, piece by piece." Her lips trembled into a smile, her tears falling freely. "I'll keep earning it, for the rest of my life." And in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't about the money, the estate, or even the betrayal. It was about resilience, about facing the worst storm and finding a way to rebuild. Not perfectly, not all at once, but slowly, with care. 6 months ago, I thought I had lost my daughter forever. Now, I see that I hadn't lost her. She had been buried under lies, under manipulation, under a predator's control, and together we had dug her out. The road ahead wasn't easy, but it was ours, and for the first time in months, I felt ready to walk it with her. 6 months after Charlie's arrest, life finally found its rhythm again. The house was quiet, but no longer haunted. Lauren was rebuilding herself, day by day. I was tending to my garden, watching the roses bloom again, and, for the first time in a long while, sleeping without fear of footsteps in the dark. But there's something I never told anyone. Not Lauren, not Margaret, not Robert, not even Charlie, though he thought he'd uncovered every secret I had. The night he opened that safe, his eyes gleaming with greed, he believed he had found the vault to my fortune. He thought the key in his pocket was the key to everything I'd built. He thought my mistakes and forgetfulness had handed him the prize he'd been circling like a vulture for months. But the truth? That safe never held my real wealth. It hadn't for years. Years ago, after losing my wife, I realized how fragile security really was. So I worked with Margaret and Robert to protect everything. Offshore trusts, layered accounts, legal frameworks designed to withstand storms I couldn't even predict. What Charlie found in that safe, those photos, those staged papers, that single note, was nothing more than old tax records and family keepsakes. And that brass key he clung to like treasure, it didn't even fit the locks that mattered. The irony still makes me smile. Charlie spent months plotting, scheming, creeping into my room like a rat in the dark, all for scraps. He obsessed over documents that meant nothing. He measured a safe that held no more value than the dust on its shelves, and in the end, he lost everything. That was the twist of it all. While he believed he was outsmarting me, I had been outsmarting him the whole time. "Collins," he said between bites of roast chicken, "how did you know which properties to invest in? I mean, what made you choose this path instead of a regular job?" I remember smiling, a little embarrassed. I wasn't used to people asking about the early days anymore. I told him about risk, about intuition, about working harder than the next guy until the breaks finally started coming. He listened intently, nodding like a student hanging on every word. And Lauren? She looked at me as if I were the hero of the story, the man who had cracked life's code. Her expression that night melted me. How could I doubt a man who made my daughter that happy? In the months that followed, Charlie was attentive, always offering to help me carry groceries, mow the lawn, fix little things around the house. He'd ask me to tell him more about my old deals, who I partnered with, what banks I used, how I structured contracts. Every mistake, every planted clue, every staged conversation about my fading memory. It was all part of the script I wanted him to follow, and he followed it perfectly. The public never learned this final detail. To them, I was the wise father who caught his greedy son-in-law in the act, who protected his estate and his daughter through foresight and patience. That was enough for the newspapers, enough for the courts. But I know the deeper truth, the real wealth, the businesses, the properties, the accounts. It was never in danger. I had locked it away long before Charlie ever set foot in my home. The only thing at risk was my daughter's trust. And though it was nearly destroyed, nearly torn beyond repair, it has begun to heal. That's the real inheritance I want to leave her. Not just money, not just assets, but wisdom. The wisdom that love without discernment can be dangerous. The wisdom that trust must be earned, not given blindly. The wisdom that strength sometimes means patience, sometimes means boundaries, and sometimes means walking through betrayal without letting it break you. On quiet nights, when the house is still, I sometimes open that old safe again. The decoy key still fits, the door still groans open, and inside are the same papers Charlie thought were priceless. I run my hand over them and smile, not because of what's inside, but because of what they represent: justice, strategy, patience, and the knowledge that the predator who once thought he could strip me bare ended up stripping himself instead. Charlie thought he was playing me, but in the end, he was only playing himself, and I was the one who wrote the ending. At the time, I thought it was harmless curiosity, maybe even a desire to follow in my footsteps. I told myself, this is good. He wants to provide for her, to learn from me. But in hindsight, I see it differently. Every question was a blueprint, every laugh a mask, every compliment a calculated move. Still, Lauren loved him. She'd glow when he walked in, defend him if I teased him about being a little too eager. "Dad, he just admires you," she'd say with that exasperated affection daughters have. Don't read into it. So I didn't. Or rather, I forced myself not to. For her sake, for her happiness. Because that's what fathers do, isn't it? We swallow our doubts, we second-guess our instincts, all so our children can hold on to their joy a little longer. And maybe that's why what happened at 3 a.m. cut so deep. Because it wasn't just betrayal by Charlie.